You're listening to the BBM Global Network with 25 years in broadcast audio and video production. Our passionate team creates content and marketing for the world of Internet Talk Radio. If you've got a passion, come join us at bbmglobalnetwork.com. The BBM Global Network. Your voice is now heard.
Welcome to Dare to Soar with your host, Dr. RC. Dr. RC will empower, encourage, and strengthen you. She will help you to soar to your highest potential while instilling hope. Please welcome the host of Dare to Soar, Dr. RC.
Good morning. Welcome to the BBM Global Network and Tune In Radio. I am Dr. RC, your host, and you are listening to Dare to Soar. Listeners, I'd like to jump right in this morning to share with you our discussion and tell you a little bit about my guest. This morning, I am speaking with Mrs. Alicia Curvey, MSW, District Truancy Social Worker, and she's going to be discussing why it is so critical that students understand why school matters as well as rebounding with attendance. Now, we know it's been a difficult time, but we're going to press forward, and she has a wealth of knowledge that she'll be sharing this morning. So let me give you a little bit about her background. Mrs. Alicia Carvey served as a graduate level school social work intern with the Atlanta Public School System during 1997 through 98. During that time, the coordinator was so impressed with her, she created a position for Alicia to walk into after graduation in May 1998. Since that time, Alicia has been a certified school social worker with Atlanta Public Schools for 23 years, serving elementary, middle, and high school students from various ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds. Now, over the years, she has provided supports for a mirage of mental health, behavioral, and environmental related concerns. The cases that she has seen over the years impacts now how she prays and how she advocates for students as well as their families. As a change agent, she realized the importance of school social work and felt it so necessary to be a part of training the next generation of future service providers. She has been a field instructor since 2001 and has served as an internship program director since 2009. During her years as coordinator, she has implemented a field supervisor training workshop, student interviews and placement processes, orientation, career readiness workshops for colleges and university groups, supervision activities as well, and now virtual models to support the remote learning experience. Let me just say that part again. Did I say virtual models? Get that notebook out. It's time to take some notes. She has helped to establish and maintain partnerships with schools of social work over 10 local colleges and universities. To date, the program has provided training to over, 100 school social work interns who have gone on into positions like leadership in various agencies and school systems within and outside of the state of Georgia. Now, outside of being a school social worker, Alicia is a wife, a mother, and a small business owner. She is the co-owner of E&K Solutions, LLC, which is a real estate investment company. She is also the owner of the Royal 5 Accessories, LLC, where you can accessorize like royalty for less. Alicia believes God has placed her on this earth to make a difference. She gives him all the glory for every accomplishment. In the end, the work that she does is for his glory and his people. Listeners, help me welcome my guest this morning, Mrs. Alicia Curvey. How are you doing this morning, Mrs. Curvey?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Fantastic. And I'd also like to add, listeners, before we jump right in, this is Attendance Awareness Month. So when I gave the introduction and the topic, that's what we're going to be talking about this morning, because we know that that is very critical. So as we jump right in this morning, Mrs. Curvey, what does it mean to be a truancy center social worker with the district?
To me, when I thought about it, I believe that it just means added support. The schools already have school social workers who work very hard to help combat attendance issues and truancy, chronic absenteeism, tardiness, and other issues that impact learning. So having a truancy social worker in a district to me is added support. We help to take a lift to another level, especially outside of the schools, because a lot of the truancy issues with students who are not attending are those in the community, and our social workers are not patrolling communities, they're in the schools. So the truancy social worker is there to help collaborate those services with APD and MARTA. And for those listeners outside of Atlanta, APD is Atlanta Police Department, and MARTA is our transportation system. And so those officers help the truancy social worker with those students. So we are all added support.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for sharing for those who are outside, because definitely this is a topic of discussion that many individuals will have some takeaways, especially school social workers. So as we continue on in your current role, would you take the Dare to Soar listeners through the process as to how cases are identified and or referred to you?
So as I mentioned, Atlanta Police Department and MARTA officers, they patrol their zones or their areas, and they identify students who are not in school during those school hours. They interface with those students, trying to find out where they're supposed to be because they could be ill, especially during this pandemic. If those students are virtual, they try to ascertain if they are supposed to be in school or out of school or on a virtual model. And so they will contact me once they identify who the student is and what their business is to verify that those students are with Atlanta Public Schools. If they are with Atlanta Public Schools, then especially now, since that we are doing face-to-face, if they are attending a face-to-face school, then that student is transported back to their school. If they're virtual, then the parent is contacted and they are either escorted home or the parent comes on the scene and picks them up. And if they're with another district, then the officers will contact that other zone to try to collaborate transporting those students. Another way that they're identified is if schools, mostly high schools, some middle schools, will identify an area in the community where students are congregating during those hours, and they can call into the school system or into the police department to say what the issue is, and then we identify those students and get them support.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for breaking apart the portion, the face-to-face and the virtual, because that is so very critical, especially right now. If nothing else, the pandemic has taught many school districts across the nation that you have to go into this thinking in a different way. All of those things that you may have packed in your kind of square or box thinking, you now have to pull them out of the box and go outside of what you're normally used to definitely get everything moving and get our students back to that face-to-face and back in the building, but you're still offering that opportunity for virtual learning as well. So I certainly appreciate you pulling those two things apart and defining those. Thank you so much for doing that. Listeners, it is time for a commercial break. Don't go away. Mrs. Curvey will have so much more to share with you. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back, listeners. I am Dr. R.C., your host, and you are listening to Dare to Soar live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. My guest this morning is Mrs. Alicia Carvey, MSW, District Truancy Social Worker, and she's discussing why it is so critical that students understand why school matters as they begin to rebound with attendance. Now, listeners, before we proceed with our next line of questioning, I would like to give you the call-in number, which is 1-866-451-1451. That number again is 1-866-451-1451. Call in. Ask Mrs. Curvey some questions. I'm sure that she will be happy and delighted to respond to you as we talk about this critical discussion this morning. Now, let's get started once again. Do you work in collaboration with the school resource officers, also known as SROs, or local police officers? And if so, please share in what capacity.
Currently, the district's SROs do not work directly with the truancy department. Their duties are outside of dealing with children specifically who are out in the community. Now, they will offer support. For instance, if we have a truancy sweep in an area where they may be able to get an officer, which they call a rover, to that area, one SRO that does not work in a school, then they will send that rover over to offer support. They also help with identifying students if there is a fight or something at MARTA station or out in the community, and I'm only one person. We can also ask SROs to support us in identifying students. A lot of times, if they don't give us the correct name, they may know, especially high school and middle school SROs, they know their students or tend to know their faces. They will help in identifying those students as well.
Fantastic. Now, for all of our listeners who are listening across the nation, I'd just like to go back to one thing that you stated in your response. Can you give a little bit or a little bird's eye view of what a sweep is?
Sure. A sweep is when an area of the community has been identified as a hotspot for students to hang out, loiter, crime, or whatever the case. Officers from both units, MARTA and Atlanta Police Department, will go out to that area together, and they will kind of, we call it sweep the area, meaning sweeping up the students, getting their information, finding out what's going on, what their business is, and then identifying if they're one of our students. Again, at that time, if they're identified as one of our students and they're able to be transported to the school, meaning they're not under the influence, they're not aggressive, dressed appropriately, they can be transported to the school, and that's considered a sweep.
Fantastic, fantastic. As I always like to say, listeners, this is a notebook opportunity, especially for school social workers, along with school districts. As we are talking about this topic of attendance, it is critical. We are always pulling ideas, trying to find out about innovative ways where we can move the needle forward. And here's an opportune time to do that. But I don't want to belabor anything. I want to continue on because I do have some more critical questions for Mrs. Curvey. And with that being said, were there any innovative ideas brought to the surface that turned into an attendance policy, especially during the pandemic?
I would say, as far as the truancy services are concerned, we used to be called the Truancy Center. And since we don't have a specific or identified location to take students to do the triage happens in the community. And so we moved away from the term Truancy Center and now call it the Truancy Prevention and Intervention Services. This allows us to make a paradigm shift. Instead of reacting to students not being in place or not logging on, we are being preventive, we are being proactive, and we are offering interventions that fit the times. We know that there are a lot of reasons why students are out, but during the pandemic, we're not assuming that they're just out loitering or having fun. A lot of times they're working on behalf of their families. A lot of times they have anxiety about the virtual experience. So even our officers have been on board and have been trained to meet the students where they are, offer empathy, sympathy, and we're just moving in a direction where we are trying to remove barriers, more so trying to penalize or be punitive with these students on site.
Oh, yes. And that last piece, a couple of things you said in there, not being punitive, removing barriers, and understanding some of the concerns that students themselves have about returning face-to-face versus the virtual. Because as we face a pandemic, it is very, very real. We know as adults, we have difficulties and concerns or anxiety and things of such that come up during this time. So imagine a child who has not fully grown into adulthood or who's not able to process appropriately what that would feel like. That is so critical to that. I just want to go back just a second, Mrs. Curvey. Can you just give us a tidbit of some of those barriers that some of our students may be facing during this time?
A lot of what I saw, which was not really surprising, but the number has increased, is mental health. Students who have not really appropriately been assessed, who were kind of coasting along in school. The pandemic has brought out more of their issues requiring a need for actual assessment and intervention. It's also brought out issues with families, parents who are unable to keep their jobs, their level of anxiety, and even their ability to parent has been stagnated, and which affects students going to school. Many parents, when we were virtual, didn't even know if their kids were logging on, and some of them were right in the home because they were depressed or just had major other issues on their minds. Another was working. Students stepping up on their own to the plate to try to provide for their families. Oh. Uh-oh, it just popped off. I'm sorry.
Okay, nope, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so those students who stepped up to the plate to offer help financially to their families was a huge issue as well. And another one that I identified were students who were identified as having mental health issues. They were not able to get services. They were not able to get medication, either due to money or due to lack of the resources in the community. And that caused a lot of anxiety. We also had to step in as social workers as a whole and even try to educate our staff to be very sensitive to those issues. So those are some of the things that I saw that were very different.
Fantastic. Now we have some more questions for you, but it is time for another commercial break. Listeners, don't go away. We will be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Sros can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Sros help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Sros provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Sros at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back once again, listeners. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am Dr. RC, your host, and you are listening to Dare to Soar. I want to continue on with the line of questioning, but first, allow me to give you the call-in number again, which is 1-866-451-1451 to chime in and ask questions to my guest this morning, Mrs. Curvey, Mrs. Alicia Curvey. So as we continue on, the last questioning is definitely a segue into my next question I'm going to ask her. And the last question was about, the innovative ideas that were brought to the surface that may have turned into attendance policies. Now, why do I say that's a segue to this? Here we go. Were there any collaborations that occurred throughout the previous school year that could potentially assist districts and school workers or school social workers or both with improving outcomes as it pertains to attendance?
I would say some of the collaborations were with the juvenile court. They had taken truancies off the table, educational neglect and truancy petitions off the table. But not just removing them off the table, but also wanting to sit together to discuss how we could better triage families and find more resources. Again, identifying those barriers, and slow down and try to find those resources for families outside of making those punitive referrals. Another collaboration was with DFACS in when students were not logging on or reporting, oftentimes they would support us and try to, help push those families or encourage those families to do so. But they also help to take a step back in helping to identify resources, being a resource for us as well in the area of benefits. If Medicaid was cut off, if food stamps were cut off, there was a little lift to try to make sure those parents got those things back in place without all the red tape to get to go put those back, to establish those back in place. And the other, again, with our law enforcement, just being there as a support for those families who are having critical issues, even in the home, and then making sure the schools are aware of those so that we can provide the support that they need, because oftentimes we don't know what's happening at home if it's not brought into the school. So the officers also help to collaborate with those issues. So those are some of the collaborations. And one other was the At Promise Center. The At Promise Center is a part of the, and I think it's the police foundation. And they were there for parents who had to work and their students had no place to go during the day for virtual. They were a great lift for us and students being able to go there and do their work.
Oh, that is wonderful. So much support, and definitely at a time that it was certainly much needed. So, connecting or linking all of those resources together was absolutely, absolutely phenomenal, especially for our families and as well as extended community members. Because when everybody kind of combines and comes together and sharing that information, word of mouth is so very powerful for individuals who are in need. So, that was just fantastic. Now, earlier I did ask you a question about the SROs. So I want to kind of flip that around just a little bit by asking what or is there any type of support that law enforcement is able to provide in partnership with the SROs?
That will be an ongoing discussion. Since the structure of our SRO department is based on them being their own entity, in the past, APD used to be a part of the SRO career. I guess that was a career for them. They would be working, I guess, part-time or sometimes full-time as officers in our school district. But when the district broke off and developed their own department, there are some lines that SROs cannot cross, or boundaries or areas they can't cross physically and legally. And so we are still in discussion as it relates to truancy, how they can be a support and how they can be a support to social workers, especially when it comes to 1013s. Also for students who may be afraid to go home and we haven't received responses from DFACS, how the SRO, since they're in our schools, can be of support as opposed to us having to contact APD. So that discussion is still commencing so that we can find not so much a common ground, but making sure that we are within the bounds for each agency to perform their legal duties.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, of course, I have to ask you to define or explain one term that you utilize because, of course, we would know that term and that terminology. But for our listeners that are tuned in from across the nation, 1013. I know they probably heard those numbers and may have thought something a little different. So can you just please break that down just a little bit for us?
Yes. So hopefully I say it correctly. 1013 is actually when a person is unable to admit themselves for mental health assessment or evaluation, or will not, then a person such as a licensed clinical social worker, a psychiatrist, psychologist, or a police officer can request that a person receive screening without their permission. For lack of an eloquent way to explain it, that person will be able to get services, I believe, for 72 hours without their signature. They may be short-term impaired. They may just not be able to speak or address things for themselves. So that 1013 is put in place for safety, and only those persons that I mentioned are qualified to do so.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Now, listeners, as I said, I am speaking with Ms. Curvey. This is Attendance Awareness Month. We are delving into this conversation and we're getting pretty deep into it also. So let me just give you that call-in number again, which is 1-866-451-1451. So we know that research plays so heavily on so many things and many aspects. Therefore, I'd like to ask if you have noted pre or post-COVID of increases within any particular population, sex, gender, ethnicity, as it relates to unexcused absences. And if so, please elaborate.
I would say the population that had an increase with issues or mental health, finances, otherwise would just be our African American and Hispanic populations. They definitely took a hit because they were already on the verge of having issues, that we were working on. But with the pandemic closing things and other financial issues happening, they took an even greater hit. So I say it's exacerbated.
Thank you so much. Now, listeners, it is time for another commercial break. We do have a bit more to share, so don't go away. We will be right back.
The opiate epidemic has reached crisis levels, and with so many families affected by addiction, opiate-related drug overdoses, and death, the time is now to have a real constructive conversation about addiction that could lead to better prevention, treatment, and recovery. Alan Charles, author and keynote speaker on drug abuse and prevention, presents The Alan Charles Show. Alan brings a message of hope, sharing his unbelievable story of surviving a 24-year addiction to cocaine and highlights from his memoir, Walking Out the Other Side, an addict's journey from loneliness to life. His raw honesty and courageous heart breaks the stigma of addiction and offers a unique perspective into the mind of an addict. Join Alan each week as he brings his listeners to a true understanding of the grip of addiction. It is only with this understanding that we can begin to heal. The Alan Charles Show, Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network. Have you ever felt like no one is listening, or you're not getting the honest attention you deserve? Do you even know the kind of attention you want or need? You are not alone. Alice Aspen March is here to help. Thanks to Alice, through her epiphany and research over the word attention, there are solutions to the attention dilemma. Worldwide audiences have been enthralled and engaged for over 40 years with her visionary and pioneering observations. The kind of attention we get and give is vital to improving our lives and society. Alice and her weekly guests review game-changing insights for transforming and improving our understanding of attention, providing techniques for creating healthier and empowering behavior. Get a new perspective on a mainstream word. Tune into Why Our Attention Matters for fresh and thought-provoking conversations every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on boldbravemedia.com and the TuneIn Radio app.
We have returned once again live on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am once again Dr. RC, your host, and you are listening to Dare to Soar. Let's get back to our questioning. So often we can think about attendance, school attendance, and not really understand the importance of it. And I'm not speaking of everyone, but we feel as there may be times when you have the thought, I can catch up. That's why we're having this conversation during Attendance Awareness Month. The possibility, there's always possibilities and many, many things. But why not go ahead and take the opportunity and move forward and go and get it right now at the moment when the opportunity is there, when it's offered to you. It is so critical. School matters. School matters, but we know our students have been through so much, a variation of highs, lows, in-betweens, and not just our students, the families as well. And then the extended part of that, those in the educational system have been through a great deal as well. That's why we're rebounding with attendance and having this discussion to delve into this conversation. And I'm talking with someone who has 23 years of experience, Mrs. Alicia Curvey, who is willing to share her knowledge and her experiences, what she's seen, what has worked, innovative processes and programs, policies that have been put in place. Don't miss this opportunity, listeners. Take note of what this veteran social worker, school social worker, is sharing with us. So let's get back to our questioning. Now, I'd like to delve a bit deeper into our previous question by asking if there has been any noted factors that affect unexcused absences, such as socioeconomic background and family dynamics as well.
Absolutely. Of course, the socioeconomic background can definitely impact attendance based on the, the family's perspective. Our schools are uniform schools, and I've seen where parents were unable to provide their students with uniforms, but also not wanting anyone to give them anything because our schools do offer uniforms, and we get a nice bag of supplies that a student would need But even things such as pride, past experiences, their own experiences in school can sometimes impede a child from achieving success because of the finances. So a parent feels like they're not where they need to be. They can, I don't know, pass that on to a child by not enforcing that they go to school because they don't want to be embarrassed. Also, things like not having washing powder to clean clothes, even though the school, again, offers so many resources, those things can be, I don't know, just can impede education. As far as environment, it kind of rolls into that. If you grew up in an environment where you were taught not to have people in your business, what happens here stays here. A lot of times it's like pulling teeth trying to find out what the barriers are because, again, of embarrassment, pride, and other things. So, and maturity too, because in nowadays, you need to speak up when you need assistance because it's all around us, but you'll miss the access if you don't identify yourself.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Powerful, powerful information you just shared there, as well as enlightening, because sometimes, well, oftentimes it can go twofold, as that when a hand is extended to say, how can I help you? How can I assist you? It's not always the interpretation, or should not always be the interpretation, that I don't want to be bothered. I don't want that help. There are so many underlying factors that go along with that. And you place that so eloquently by responding to that question, because that is a reality that happens each and every day. And not just here in Georgia, it happens across the nation with families. They do have pride. They do have pride. I cannot say that enough. And it's about how we deliver information as to how they're going to receive that information as well. That's a big part of that. So let's continue on. Are there any collaborative team efforts that occur to get a student or students back on track?
Yes, I would first start with our incentives. When we looked at how this pandemic was impacting our students' learning, we knew, and we also knew that face-to-face was going to be back in effect. So we discussed changing our perspective, meaning the school as a whole needs to buy into this attendance matters, school matters too. We have to create a culture and climate in the schools that students want to be a part of. And for example, I thought back when I was younger, how much I loved school. First, at home, school was important, so I knew that. But once I got to school, I felt so welcomed. I loved the traditions that we had. I looked forward to certain activities. And that's what we felt that each school should embody. Not that schools were not doing a good job, but we could always do a better job when faced with new challenges to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all students. So with that said, the incentive program for Awareness Month, where we do the poster contest where any student can submit a poster or a graphic design, can be entered to win a prize for a grade level. But we also extended that to saying that each month we would continue on with an attendance theme, so that attendance would not be a September thing, but a year-long tradition of awarding students, not for just coming to school, but having another layer of something important that they have to look forward to. They may not win, but the excitement of being able to be entered or participate is enough to add to that culture and climate of positivity.
Oh, that is absolutely, absolutely wonderful, wonderful. Now, you know that you just had a moment when you responded to this question that I could definitely see some PR going there. School is fun, innovative, all of those things. So that can certainly be put together, and, a PR moment. I just absolutely love that, because when you reflect back to that time when we were growing up, that, it was a joy. You had a big smile on your face, all of those things. But we know that times change and the dynamics of life happen. And that is very clear, but it's about continuing that motivation and having that out of the box thinking as to, okay, we've tried this and now we're trying to move forward to this. So what actually can keep things motivated and going so we can keep those smiles on the faces of our children at all levels? I'm going to pause right here, listeners. It is time for another commercial break. Don't go away. We will be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back, listeners. We have returned once again, and I hope that you all are enjoying this wonderful conversation that I am having with Mrs. Alicia Curvey, who is an MSW and Truancy School Social Worker. She has shared a wealth of information. I truly hope that each and every one of you have been taking notes during this time as to what can possibly be implemented through your departments and within your school districts as well. The collaboration that happens with SROs, and then the fine line that may be with your law enforcement also. But can a collaboration possibly happen? Oh, most certainly, of course. It's just sitting down to the table, having that conversation to see how it all can fit together, just like a complete and full, beautiful puzzle. We definitely want to have those responses. Definitely want to have some takeaways during this conversation because it is critical. It is important to collaborate, to come together as one for the betterment of who? Our children. Once again, for the betterment of who? Our children, because it's all about them getting and receiving that education that they need. But of course, before they can do that, they have to be present. Let me say that again. They have to be present to receive it. If they're not in the seats, then they cannot redeliver information that has been shared with them through our educators. I don't want to prolong our conversation because I do have a few more questions I'd like to ask Mrs. Carvey. So let's go back and jump right in. Would you say that attendance is the responsibility of one individual, or should it be more of a team approach? Now, this is a two-part question, Mrs. Curvey, so I'm going to add a little bit more onto this. In addition, who in your experience should be the bridge builders in and outside of the educational setting?
The bridge builders, I've been thinking about that, and I actually still believe it's the staff as a whole, a team approach, because you don't want, there's no I in team. So I'm a firm believer in that. And so no matter how skillful we are as far as building rapport for our students, we have to take that same approach with the staff and making sure that they feel equipped to also deal with these same families that we deal with, even when they're in crisis. And so I feel like from the principal down even to the custodian, we all play a major part in these kids coming and being successful. And so when we look at that picture that way, then a student can also feel a part of that same picture. If we exclude anyone from that, then they feel like anyone is dispensable, or maybe we all don't matter. So this, to me, team is always the most effective, and it's research-based. If you look at Attendance Works, I think it's .org, they have like wealth of information about attendance practices and interventions, prevention, and they truly also believe and have researched that the team approach is way more effective than any individual could offer.
Yes, yes, it definitely is. Oftentimes when attendance is presented, someone may want to label, well, the school social worker needs to do that. No, everyone within that educational setting is taking notice of that child, whether it's, like through your peripheral vision, or you actually have a conversation with them, or you just say good morning or hello, good afternoon, have a great day. How's your day going? It's all about that. It definitely is. So I so appreciate you responding to that with a team effort and the approach. It is all hands on deck. As many times as we hear that terminology, even more so, that is a time to do that. All hands on deck, because that's what it's going to take to get that child across the stage. All of us paying attention to what is going on. And even if it's in a pass by conversation, still sharing and passing that information on to the appropriate individuals in the building. It takes all of us. Definitely does. Now, let's shift a bit, because yes, you have been a social worker for 23 years. Hand claps, applause, absolutely wonderful. Congratulations to that. But also, you're an entrepreneur. Let me say that again, listeners. She's an entrepreneur. Did you hear that? So at this time, I'd just like to shift gears by going in and asking you to share a bit about your co-ownership with E&K Solutions, LLC, which is a real estate company, along with the Royal 5 accessories. And listeners, check this out, where one can accessorize royalty for less. I just love that. So please share with our listeners a bit about both of those, please.
Yes, ma'am. Our company, E&K Solutions, is a real estate investment company that's formed by myself and my husband. We started off by buying properties and renting them out, which was fun, being a landlord, and just collecting money each month and interfacing with clients. We get to choose who they are. And based on, what their need is, we feel like we're giving back by offering them a home. And even though they're paying us, but it's also in exchange for building their credit and just building their ability to save up money to purchase a home, because we believe that everyone that wants to purchase should be able to purchase. We also turned that into a flipping business where we would buy homes to get them renovated and earn a little bit more money, which is even more fun, because our end game is to own an apartment complex, 1, 2, or 3 of those. That's our end game. So we moved from renting. We're not far removed from it, but the flipping game is a lot more lucrative. It is on hold at the moment. We're still Skyping out places that we could get the best deals, but with the pandemic, it's kind of on hold, but we're still educating ourselves on other ways to go ahead and attain that dream of those apartment complexes. Now for me, with the Royal 5 accessories, of course, I'm wearing my jewelry now. That was an awesome venture that I moved into when my mom passed. I always thought about how she looked like royalty all the time. And so when I saw this business for jewelry and I thought about her armoire, looked like a mini store, I was like, this would be a great way to honor my mom. And so I get to offer jewelry that's only $5 to people who can't afford to buy multiple styles of jewelry. This gives them an opportunity to wear any styles, try any styles, and look like royalty for less. So that's a business that took off in 2017, and I run it part-time, mostly at night and on the weekends, since I do my full-time job as a Truancy Social Worker.
Wow, now that is awesome. Talk about giving a memorable opportunity and a legacy. That's a legacy. that you're doing. Listeners, it is time for another commercial break. We just have a little bit more to share before our time is up. We will be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Sros can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Sros help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Sros provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Sros at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical. The opiate epidemic has reached crisis levels, and with so many families affected by addiction, opiate-related drug overdoses, and death, the time is now to have a real constructive conversation about addiction that could lead to better prevention, treatment, and recovery. Alan Charles, author and keynote speaker on drug abuse and prevention, presents The Alan Charles Show. Alan brings a message of hope, sharing his unbelievable story of surviving a 24-year addiction to cocaine and highlights from his memoir, Walking Out the Other Side, an addict's journey from loneliness to life. His raw honesty and courageous heart breaks the stigma of addiction and offers a unique perspective into the mind of an addict. Join Alan each week as he brings his listeners to a true understanding of the grip of addiction. It is only with this understanding that we can begin to heal. The Alan Charles Show, Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network.
We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am Dr. RC, your host, and you're listening to Dare to Soar. Listeners, we are about to wrap our hour up for this morning. And my guest, Mrs. Alicia Curvey, has once again, as I stated previously, shared a wealth of information, provided some ideas that should put a little question mark in your head to say, how can I add on to this? And remove that question mark and becomes a period that goes on, because we know that information and sharing of that is so critical, especially when working with our children in the school system. Before I get to my last question with Mrs. Carvey, I'd like to share something with you from a website that she shared a little bit earlier in our conversation, which is Attendance Works. And I'm taking this information directly from them just to give each and every one of you across the nation an idea of what is happening and what we're facing. And they're sharing across the country more than 8 million. Let me say that again, more than 8 million students are missing so many days of school that they are academically at risk. Chronic absence, missing 10% or more of school days due to absence for any reason, excused, unexcused absences, and suspensions can translate into students having difficulty to read by the third grade. Achieving in middle school and graduating from high school. That in itself is a very, very powerful statement. Additionally, children living in poverty are 2 to 3 times more likely to be chronically absent and to face most harm because their community lacks the resources to make up for the loss in learning. Students from communities of color, as well as those with disabilities, are disproportionate. And that is something that Ms. Curvey shared herself earlier. So with that being said, as I always share with you, anyone I bring on the show or any research I provide, I always do my very best to get it from individuals who's, one, been in the field for a time, and 2, when the research comes, I'm always wanting to give you a direction as to where you can go and find this information for yourself. So that's why I felt it was so critical just to share that bit of information. So as we wrap up this morning, Mrs. Carvey, before I end the broadcast, I'd like to ask 2 more questions, and it's intertwined together? Are you available for presentations and speaking events? And how can our listeners contact you? Website, etc., social media, all of those beautiful things.
Absolutely. I would say that I am available for presentations. I know that this whole attendance and truancy is on the rise as far as people wanting to know innovative ways on how to combat absences, how to support families. So I would definitely be available for presentations. I can be reached via email, and I would share my work email, which is alicia.curvey@atlanta.k12.ga.us. That is a way. You can also call the school office or the main office, which is 404-802-3640.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Listeners, my time has come to a close, but I will be back on again next week. I'd like for you all to give a silent hand clap and wave to my guest, Mrs. Carvey. She has been just absolutely wonderful, wonderful this morning, but sharing this information about school matters, and our children are rebounding with attendance. Ladies and gentlemen, I always appreciate you tuning in each and every week that I am on the air. I'm always so thankful for that. But always remember to never be afraid to elevate to new heights as you spread your wings and dare to soar. Have a fantastic rest of the week. Stay safe. Take care of one another. And check on someone today. You never know what they may be going through. Have a great, great week once again. Mrs. Curvey, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And that is our show, ladies and gentlemen.
This has been Dare to Soar with your host, Dr. RC. Come take a ride and soar to your highest level possible each week on Dr. RC's Dare to Soar.
You've been listening to the BBM Global Network. The ideas, views, and opinions of this broadcast are those of the participants of the program and are not necessarily the ideas, views, and opinions of the BBM Global Network Company.